First tonight, America's key trading partners have condemned US President Donald Trump's widening of the global trade war. He's announced steep new import tariffs of 25% on cars and car parts coming into the US. The latest tariffs should come into effect on the 2nd of April, with charges on businesses importing vehicles due to start the next day. Germany said the tariffs were very bad news. Japan, too, has been quite critical, with the Prime Minister making the point that Japan is the world's largest foreign direct investor into the US, and so hitting them with these tariffs is most unfair. Speaking from the Oval Office at the White House, President Trump said the measure would create jobs and investment.
Signing a executive order today that's going to lead to tremendous growth in the automobile industry. Now, we're going to make it all countries, and we're going to make it very lenient. I think people are going to be very surprised. It'll be, in many cases, less than the tariff that they've been charging us for decades. So I think people are going to be very, very surprised. And we're going to charge countries for doing business in our country and taking our jobs, taking our wealth, taking a lot of things that they've been taking over the years. They've taken so much out of our country, friend and foe, and frankly, friend has been oftentimes much worse than foe.
Well, for more on President Trump's new tariffs, I'm joined now on the line from our studios in Lagos by Nigeria's arguably most prominent economist and economic analyst, Bismarck Rewane. Bismarck, thank you very much indeed for joining us. First of all, what's your assessment of the impact these latest tariffs will have on the global auto industry? I mean, a 25% rate on assembled cars and some parts sounds like a very harsh, very steep rate.
Extremely disruptive, Charles. It's disruptive, but before we go into it, I think we must understand that the United States of America is a leading democracy, is a leading and the largest economy in the world, with GDP in excess of $27 trillion. But let me start off by two quotes. One is by Ricardo, who is the proponent and the new classical economist who talked about free trade. And he said this: by means of trade, every nation enjoys the advantages of every climate, every soil, and every invention of foreign nations. Second, I will quote from Paul Krugman, who is the Nobel Prize economist who trained at MIT, and he says, protectionism is a seductive but dangerous policy. It makes people feel like their country is winning, even when the economy as a whole is losing. It's very important to understand this. So my say is that President Trump is being disruptive, but he's also taking short-term measures, which he thinks as a bargaining tool. So please note that he said the effect is on April 2nd. But let us understand something, Charles. One, the global automobile industry is $4.3 trillion. It's growing at 7%, and in 2023, it was $4.07 trillion, which is 4% of global GDP. The leading manufacturing countries, number one, China. China produces 31.2 million cars every year, followed by the United States, which produces 10.2 million cars, and Japan, 6 million cars. What are the leading brands in the world today? Toyota is number one, Volkswagen is number two, and Hyundai. So Toyota is the world's largest automaker, renowned for its reliability and hybrid. You know, the Lexus, the Camrys, and so on. Hyundai, which came from nowhere, is now also a leading player out of Korea. And then Volkswagen, of course, you know, a leader in, they have the premium quality, which is part of the Porsche but then you have the Volkswagen itself. But Volkswagen meant people's car. It was founded during the time of Adolf Hitler, and he wanted to be a socialist. I think that's, let's start from there. But some recent trends that are worth noting, and stereotypes. One is that there's a move from internal combustion engines, which is dependent on brown energy, to EVs and all sorts of new gas-fired, compressed natural gas and all that. So we have 3D printing in manufacturing, we have connected and smart vehicles, we have driverless vehicles and all. But the whole idea that we thought that brown energy and oil was going to be obsolete is not correct. We think that there's room for both, and then we can talk about
okay. Well, look, what I'm interested in, I'm sorry to interrupt you, is the fact that President Trump appears convinced that his tariffs will be an economic story for the United States. Are you as convinced as he is? Because many economists have said that the result of these tariffs will be a dramatic reduction in sales in the US and a big hit on anyone thinking of buying a car, as well as the car firms that are very integrated.
Quite frankly, I think that Trump is a student of voodoo economics because in a global trade war, nobody wins. Secondly, there's a link between trade and GDP, right? So the more the trade, the more the GDP. But let us go and test this basic assumption. The basic assumption is that the tariffs will increase the revenue of the United States, and the revenue of the United States will be used to create jobs. But what he forgets is that there's fully built cars, there's semi-knockdown cars, there's completely knockdown cars, and that most of the components are made in other parts of the world. So the question of cost efficiency and blind economic patriotism, which will get him nowhere. He says he will reduce taxes for the billionaires. His type of democracy is democracy for the billionaires, by the billionaires, and for the billionaires. But that doesn't work. That is what Ronald Reagan tried with the Arthur-Laffer curve, what we call supply-side economics or trickle-down economics. That was done, and it fell out of favor because in the end, the world saw that trickle-down economics doesn't work. They believe that the guys who make the money will invest more and all of that, but really, the deficit of the United States is quite huge. So my take is that Donald is playing the short-term game to negotiate and to win some, he has many irons in the fire, and you don't know which is more important. He's a guy who throws up 10 balls, and once he catches the biggest one, what happens to the others is of no relevance to him. So that is his own type of economics. And
that's very interesting. Nevertheless, we've seen the South Korean firm Hyundai talking about a $21 billion investment in the US. I mean, is it not possible that in the medium to long term, many companies will increase their investment in the US and ultimately the impact for America as a whole will be a positive one?
Well, definitely, the American market cannot be underestimated. But if you look at global GDP and income per capita, look at what's happening in Europe. The bigger the free trade zone, the more prosperous those countries are. And America is practicing protectionism. They're going to have some crisis with Canada. Obviously, Mexico is having a problem there. But look at what's happening in Europe, in Germany, Italy, France, and all. The bigger the market, the freer the market, and the entire process of open markets is what facilitates trade and growth. And there's no question about that. I think it's interesting to note that. I don't know, but this is a man who has a short term, he has only 4 years, or he has 3.5 years left, and his influence as a leader is a declining function of time. So we must understand that.
Indeed. So, I mean, Bismarck, you're somebody who is arguably, one of the best economic minds, not just in Nigeria, but across the continent, and you keep tabs on what is going on globally. I mean, how did we get from a President Trump who, in his first term, signed and applauded the US, Mexico, Canada free trade agreement in North America to President Trump today, who is putting tariffs on almost everything. I mean, what do you reckon happened in his thinking?
Well, first and foremost, one has to look at his background. And, you know, this is a man who runs casinos and is a real reality TV promoter. So he's very short-term. I think that a man who runs a casino is synonymous with gambling. And it's gone into bankruptcy a few times. So basically, I think that his own philosophy of economics is short-term, right? And very short-term for that matter. But Keynes said, in the long run, we're all dead. So I believe that he has a game plan, but I do not think the outcome, when you talk about modern economic theory, the outcome is not going to be a win-win. He's going to have to reverse himself, like he has reversed himself many times. So I won't be surprised when we see him come back. I think that between himself and Canada, there will be rapprochement. Between himself and Mexico, there will be more alignment of goals. And therefore, as he rearranges the game and America wants to remain the largest economy in the world. But what is important is that 75% of the trade in the world is settled in US dollars. If there's any de-dollarization of business in the world, it affects you. He said here, and I listened to him, saying that they come to take our jobs and take our investment. But what you must realize is that almost 80% of all the external reserves of all the countries in the world are in US dollars. You know what that means? It means that we are investing money, investing our dollars, buying dollars to invest in that country, and the US is thriving on that. We have no problem because the US plays a particular role in terms of defending. They won the Second World War, they won the Cold War, and they have invested significantly. And that economy has made a major shift from being a production economy to becoming a service economy. So that transition is there. But what you must not assume is that the rest of the world is static. Don't forget that 10, 15 years ago, the Chinese income per capita was much, much lower than what it is today. Today, they've taken over 700 million people out of poverty. They are producing things across the world. They have the Road and Belt Initiative. Look at what's happening to Saudi Arabia. Look at what's happening to Canada. So the world has moved, and therefore you cannot have some of the parameters static while the others are dynamic.
So, I mean, obviously you were talking about the rest of the world. I mean, are these tariffs, particularly these auto tariffs, likely to affect people here in Nigeria?
Yes, the problem is that, let us see where Nigeria is. Nigeria, at last count, has a GDP of about 219 or $220 billion. We are 0.2%, 0.2% of the global economy in size. But we have 215 million people estimated, right? So we are about 2.3% of global population and producing only 0.2% of global output. In other words, when you look at the global economy, the Nigerian economy is parasitic. That is, what we are consuming is more than what we are putting in there. So we need to change that. Secondly, that Nigeria is part of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. And Nigeria needs to, the goal is to move the Nigerian economy from where it is to $1 trillion by 2030. That's not going to happen. Let's be clear. But it's an aspiration, and we're going to move closer. So what are we going to do? We are going to have the cosmetic surgery of rebasing, which gives you a feel-good factor. Then we will increase output by investments and all that. But you can see that when you look at Nigeria, its influence, economic influence, geopolitical influence, right, and its economic diplomatic influence as well is declining. So we need to catch up with the economy. We have to be more productive, have greater output, and more than anything else, we're moving from a natural wealth economy, which is oil-based, to a produced wealth economy in terms of other goods and services. So that's the challenge. So right now, Nigeria is not aligned internationally in terms of geopolitics, but Nigeria is as a factor,
Right.
as a geopolitical factor, as a geoeconomic factor, is actually becoming more irrelevant.
Well, that's a rather interesting note to end, but I want to thank you very much indeed. Always appreciate your analysis. Bismarck Rewane is one of Nigeria's and Africa's foremost economists. He was talking to me from our studios in Lagos.